Our story begins with a chubby boy sitting on his bed, astonished by what he sees on his phone. He has been reborn in this world, but it seems that the social roles of men and women are reversed. At this moment, it has already been 2 days since he arrived in this world, but he still hasn't gotten used to this fat body. In his past life, he was a famous alpha male emperor. However, now he is in a world where men are being mugged in the streets by girls. Women have the role of giving birth, but it is the men who take care of the child and the house. Besides all this being strange, the spiritual energy of this world is low, and it won't be easy to regain his power, so he might be forced to wash dishes and be submissive to women. In his past life, he fought a very powerful demon, and both lost their bodies. It seems that only his soul survived and ended up reviving. Now he is in the body of Lin Mo, a rich and spoiled boy from a private school. Thoughtful, he wonders if that demon also revived, so he must live as Lin Mo until he regains his strength. That's why even an emperor needs to go to school. Looking around, he assumes that his family isn't too bad. Still, that house is smaller than his last fish tank. In his memories, it seemed that his parents died in an accident, and his grandmother was in the hospital with advanced Alzheimer's. His distant aunt took on the role of guardian after being abandoned, and along with her, his family also moved. Before he knew it, everything that belonged to him was already his aunt's, and his quality of life had decreased. Walking through the house, the boy approaches a table. The one with the hair that looked like a cow had licked it was named June, and the other was Shixuan. The boy's aunt appears, saying he arrived just in time to discuss his studies and that Yanhui was right, mentioning that school was a joke. Hearing the name his aunt mentioned, the boy becomes thoughtful. In his body's memories, his grandmother organized a wedding for him before she had Alzheimer's, and the girl's name was the same. However, she was shocked when she learned about it, disdainfully asking how he could go out as someone fat like him. While crossing the street, he was accidentally hit by a truck. When that happened, his aunt cancelled the wedding, thinking that it was incredible because the emperor of his generation would have to marry someone from that world by another woman's decision. Still in the kitchen, his aunt asks if he is listening to her. The boy says it was nothing, telling her not to arrange another marriage for him. Observing Lin's expression, the woman thinks he seems different. Unexpectedly, there seemed to be a feeling of inexplicable tyranny. Then Lin sits at the table, thinking that he hasn't had an appetite since he started his diet. But for that body not to starve, he should take it easy. Picking up a piece of food, he thinks it smells good. Then his cousin asks why he wasn't going to study abroad since his classmates knew how much he expressed his love for others. Lin wonders why he needed to talk to those insects when this emperor reigned for thousands of years. Still, now it was necessary to play the role of a normal person, saying he wouldn't go now because he was happy with that school. The boy says it didn't matter which school he attended as long as he got good grades. Continuing to eat, Lin thinks he didn't want to talk to him. An hour later, the protagonist was inside a car, and the person driving informed them that they had arrived. His cousin, in turn, asks Lin not to get out with him. With a look of disdain, the protagonist observes him, leaving the boy scared by that look. Then he got out of the car, frustrated. Next, Lin was already in front of a building. Mentioning that the architecture of that world was excellent, however, there were some problems. Each of those men stood out a lot since they showed their pale legs and even made gestures like girls, but at least the women seemed normal. In the background, 2 girls were teasing the protagonist's brother, saying that his legs were beautiful. With disdain, the boy thinks that it was unpleasant enough to almost make him vomit. However, he should forget about it because he didn't know if that demon was still alive. Plus, he needed to strengthen his body before she appeared. As he walked through the school, Lin finds his classroom. In the background, someone seemed to mock the protagonist, saying that his fiancé /U00E9 was there. His wife was sitting at the table while 2 girls were talking to her. Observing the protagonist, she didn't seem to like his presence. Lin thinks it's incredible how unbearable mortals can be. The boy, heading towards his desk, leaves Yanhui confused. While sitting down, he thinks about how he could resume his cultivation in some way. Someone taps him on the shoulder, saying he should believe her when she said he couldn't like her. This was a girl with red hair giving him advice. Remembering the girl, Lin thinks she must be the classmate of that body. Continuing to speak, the girl questions how he could like someone from the 2nd class. Noticing Lin still quiet, she assumes she has spoken too much. Saying that there was still a chance with Yanhui, who might like him if he lost a bit of weight. Then the protagonist asks her to just say what she wanted to say. The girl asks how he knew she was plotting something, and Lin mentions that she wasn't that kind. Next, the girl really wanted to ask him a favor. Requesting to play a game with her, saying it wouldn't take long. And as a reward, she would introduce him to a girl more beautiful than Yanhui. There is a mountain that cannot be reached alone, but she had contacts to help climb directly, so she was thinking of going during the summer. Mentioning that the place was impressive at night, and he would regret refusing to go there. Lin thinks of a rumor that high mountains attract spiritual energy, and that mountain was the closest in the region, so there was a high chance it had energy at the top. Also, it was a great opportunity for that body to lose weight by climbing the mountain. Accepting the proposal, he mentions that he wasn't good at games, making her happy. The girl says they would have a match against an idiot from class 3 who loves to pretend to be good. So after class, they could use the computers in the computer club. Sometime later, in the computer room, the girl mentions that she had reserved the room just for them, so no one would bother them. Sitting in the chair, she asks Lin to connect to a user. Then the protagonist enters his password, successfully logging into his account. Inside the game, the boy, looking at a window, says it was a competitive action game with an immortal theme. That girl appears, saying she had called the boss of that realm, because he would help them. Then the boss appears, mentioning that she had indeed brought a man, apparently liking the protagonist because he was a classmate of her friend. Cutting the mood, she says she would start the 3 versus 3 PvP mode. Starting to run, the girl asks them to be quiet while she would take down the enemy group. Then the protagonist's friend asks him to hide while she goes to check. Lin thinks that only legendary beings from his world can be immortal, but cultivation in everything from his world was similar to the game. Assuming there was a probability that there were immortals in that world, so he should be careful. While sitting, a notification appears that someone had died. That girl from before appears, apparently stressed. Starting to run again, she says she made a mistake and now would take revenge. However, she ends up dying again. Repeating the cycle of running again, but now the protagonist's friend would help. Even so, it was of no use. Outside the game, the protagonist's friend is furious because even the boss of that realm couldn't defeat that person. Telling the protagonist to be careful because Flying Feather was on the way, but Lin was completely calm. While running, the boy thinks he had developed his fighting instincts over thousands of years, capable of using them even in games. Throughout all this, the other team was still behind the protagonist while 2 girls fawned over the person playing. Then the girl says he couldn't escape from her. Looking back, Lin realizes someone is following him. Stopping to run, he thinks it was an emperor, and that's why he had never been chased. Noticing that Lin had seen her, the woman quickly hides. The protagonist, in turn, asserts that it was a quick reaction and that body couldn't win since attacks in that game were hard to use. Outside the game, Lin seemed to be using a skill. The woman observing the protagonist mentions that he was a novice who had no idea where he was, so that was a positive point going against the boy. Quickly, Lin uses the keyboard and mouse, launching an attack on the woman. Suddenly it hits her where a notification of a dead player appears. On the other side, they were surprised that the protagonist had managed to win. Getting up from the chair, Lin's friend says she didn't know he was so good. Noticing him motionless, she questions if everything is okay. Lin thinks he had no idea a body like that could be so damaged by a simple use of spiritual energy. Returning to the game, one of his friends asks to go back, but she no longer had time, thinking she had finally found him. Wondering why he always kept running away, but this time she would kill him, going after the protagonist. Meanwhile, the boy ran without stopping. Noticing that the girl had found him again, he thinks he should boost the lower part of his body again, throwing his sword towards the woman. Then she questions if the boy wanted to hit her from so far away. At that moment, her leg gets hit, where she ends up falling to the ground. Looking at the sword in her leg, she wonders if that was a warning to stop following him. Outside the game, one of her friends says they should stop chasing him. The girl, in turn, asks if she knew the other side, asking to contact them right now. Sitting in the chair, she murmurs the protagonist's name. On the other side, the protagonist's friend receives a call from those girls wanting to see her. Approaching Lin, his friend says he was amazing, suggesting to play a few more matches, but the boy didn't want to play anymore, asking her not to forget the promise he had made before. Sometime later, Lin was already near his house. Inside his room, the boy lies down, mentioning that his body was very fragile. The next day, while going to school, his cousin calls him, asking him to explain to his classmates that the marriage with Yanhui was not real. Then the protagonist says there was no need to explain what was false. As he was leaving, his cousin says he was very arrogant. Inside the classroom, his friend notices his presence, asking if he knew who that girl from before named Zhao Yutan was, mentioning that, incredibly, she was from his school. It seemed he had been through a lot since he lost his love, mentioning that the girl wanted to see him and he didn't need to worry because she wouldn't do anything to a guy. But before he could finish the sentence, with a threatening look, the protagonist watches him. Suddenly he doesn't complete the sentence, mentioning that it wasn't Momo baby. Then a girl approaches the protagonist's table. That was Yanhui saying they needed to clarify things and he should say it was just a fake marriage. Lin's friend says she was going too far. After all, Lin Mo was just a boy and should have more compassion. The girl questions what that had to do with anything and if she liked the protagonist. Jumping into the conversation, the boy says that whether it was true or false, there was no possibility of him being with the girl, asking her to leave. Yanhui says he was being too full of himself and didn't know how much that bothered her, so he should never say he would marry again. The boy in the background says Lin was very strong because he hadn't cried yet, and the other guy says that if it were him, he would leave school immediately. Then someone enters the room. That was the girl he had lost to before, accompanied by 2 more people. The people in the background mentioned that was Zhao Yutong. Rumors said she caused a lot of trouble, and everyone who got involved with her dropped out of school. Approaching Lin, the girl calls the protagonist. Apparently, Yen Hui was her sister, asking if she wanted something. Then the girl calls Momo Baby, which was the protagonist's profile name in the game, telling him to follow her. Meanwhile, Lin, irritated, continued sitting in the chair, thinking he was the emperor and not Momo Baby. In the background, those two boys ask how he got close to Yutong and why he was being called Momo Baby. His friend, in turn, apologizes because the girl wanted to play with the protagonist alone. She just needed to go out with her and then could do whatever she wanted. Leaving the room, Lin murmurs that those people were very annoying. At the door of his class, Yutong was waiting for him, thinking he didn't expect Momo Baby to be a man instead of a woman, claiming that it was fun because back in the day, women fought in combat skirts, but now that it become a norm for them. Then she starts asking Lin several questions, questioning if it was him who defeated her in that game, giving an order to look for him after class because she would duel with him alone. But Lin says she didn't play that game and had only won by luck, saying she would go back to class. Irritated, Yutong wonders if the boy didn't know who she was. Then the other girl states that it was no surprise Lin wasn't afraid of her since there was no more love in her heart because she had been left. Yutong, in turn, gives the order for her to bring the boy at noon. Returning to the classroom, a group of boys asks what Yutong had said to him. Her friend says that the girl had been attracted to the protagonist, so she just wanted to play with him alone, asking not to worry because she would take him to Wuju Mountain on the weekend and would arrange for some girls. With a threatening look, Lin tells her not to bring anyone else. Imagining supposedly illicit things, the girl feels embarrassed, saying various things and that she shouldn't be interested in her. Then the other girl appears saying that Yutong was waiting for the protagonist. However, Lin was no longer in the classroom. In the cafeteria, Lin was eating while people in the background teased him, saying he ate too much. At the reception, the boy asks the man to wrap it up for the trip. Leaving the place, the protagonist thinks he still hadn't gotten used to that noisy world and he shouldn't get upset about that. In the background, someone approached the boy, murmuring various things about that body dying in a year and if he wished to survive, he should merge with her, and as a reward, she would fulfill his wishes. As he walked, people around observed his beauty. The woman says she had made the right decision. From now on, her 18 years of life would be part of her, mentioning that it was a pity that all the joys and sorrows they had gone through were just a drop in an ocean for her. After working hard for so long, she managed to defeat the emperor. However, it wasn't the ending she desired and now the only thing she could do was revive the demon world. But the emperor had many tricks up his sleeve so he wouldn't die easily. Therefore, she should be careful since he could have gone to that world, claiming that that world was very interesting. She had never gained her father's approval in the demon world, no matter how hard she tried, just because she was a woman. Those men belittled her and only wanted to possess her until the day she put on a mask of evil spirits, killing them so they would fear her. However, in that place, men were at a disadvantage, and cultivation wasn't bad despite the spiritual power being scarce. Moreover, she was beautiful enough for men to follow, but it had been a while since that fat guy had been after her, and as a woman, it was good to be direct. Looking back, their gazes met. The girl, in turn, asked him to stop following her because there would be nothing between them. However, our boy walked straight past, ignoring the poor girl. Embarrassed, the girl thinks she should regain her strength before leaving that world, mentioning that the boys in that world were very shy, so Lin should have been embarrassed, refusing to admit he was chasing her. That's why she hadn't said anything to avoid embarrassment. Returning to the protagonist, he was apparently bothered, wondering why that girl was following him. Noticing that Lin was going to the terrace, he thinks he should look for another place to be alone, but he remembers that normal students never went to that place. The people in that world are spiritually and physically weak, questioning if Lin would jump off the terrace. However, that was none of his business. Even so, he still felt bothered, remembering that the friend of the owner of his original body had also jumped from a building. Heading towards the terrace, he thinks he would fulfill that body's will. Reaching the top of the building, he sees the protagonist at the edge of the terrace. Then he uses a skill to immobilize him. However, he had forgotten that he had no spiritual power. Meanwhile, Lin calmly thinks that it was quite cold up there, so it would be better to go down for lunch. Then that girl appears, asking the protagonist to wait. While grabbing his stomach, Lin asks what she was doing. Lifting the boy, she asks the protagonist to come down. But she is surprised by the boy's weight, falling to the ground with him, where she even ends up breaking a rib. On top of her, Lin says he didn't even have time to respond, questioning what she was doing. The girl says she was just helping him because he was going to jump in an isolated place, thinking she had broken a rib because of him. Surprised, Lin thinks the girl thought he was going to jump off the building, assuming it was because in that world, men were fragile while women were strong, extending his hand to help, asking to control her imagination since he had only gone out for some air and did not intend to jump off the building. Moreover, he was not interested in her, leaving the girl embarrassed, telling him to never show up in front of her again. As Lin leaves, he thinks that the woman had dismissed the help of an emperor without even knowing it, and since she didn't want help, there was nothing he could do. Back in the room, his friend asks where the young man was, mentioning that Yutong was looking for him and telling him not to leave after class. The protagonist, in turn, says that all of this was her fault, so she should solve it on her own. But the girl says she would go with him after class to play with Yutong, and if she let him win, it should be enough to leave him in peace. Even so, Lin says he wouldn't go, thinking he didn't want to lose to a little girl, even if it was just a game. His friend continues trying to convince the protagonist, but the young man says the problem was hers. The girl says she would do anything for him, but Lin had already decided he wouldn't go. Then his friend thinks she had messed up. Sometime later, the day passes. Getting up, the protagonist says it's time to leave and shouldn't forget his promise on Wuju Mountain. As he leaves, Lin remembers something, recalling that he had fallen on that girl, wondering if she was okay. The human body is very